Hello, I'm Adam Jasser. Welcome to Face to Face, our weekly summary of key international events with TVP World Editor-in-Chief Michał Broniatowski. Michał, welcome.
Thank you.
Israel attacked Iranian nuclear and military facilities, killed a number of senior military commanders and nuclear scientists. This happened 2 days before the US and Iranian negotiators were to meet about Iran's nuclear program. Is this a coincidence?
I think it's probably bad luck for Mr. Trump. And
I think it's bad luck for the Iranians, first of all.
This is obvious, but
okay.
When you ask about coincidence, it has nothing to do, of course, with Iran. I think it is a part of camouflage, which was made by Israelis. Well, Iranians had good reason to believe that Netanyahu wouldn't do it just a few days before resumption of these peace talks between the US and Iran. Plus, he also made everybody think that he would go short leave to attend a wedding party of his son. So, of course, they
So you're saying that they were trying to catch
yes,
the Iranians.
Yes, on the part of Trump, the fact that as the result of this bombing, which hasn't stopped yet and probably will last for some time, Iranians have already announced that they stop any peace talks with the US. So it is the third in a row collapse of big and beautiful peace initiatives of Mr. Trump.
Right.
Starting with Ukraine, then Gaza, and now
But it also
Iran.
puts Iran on a back foot. This is one in a series of events recently where Israel has gained advantage over Iran, right? We had the events in Lebanon, Hezbollah, killing commanders of Hezbollah in Gaza, several Hamas leaders were killed, and now comes this. And Iran has consistently failed to be able to respond. So in a sense, it also exposes the weakness of the Tehran regime.
Luckily, in the end, they have nothing else to show but
so far.
But weakness. You know, the first reaction of Iran was sending drones, which of course have no chance of reaching.
It takes them 7 hours to reach Israel.
Yeah, so it's they are easy targets. They haven't used any ballistic missiles. We will see
yet. So what does it mean? What does it mean for the other conflicts around the world? And of course, here we're particularly interested in the Ukraine war.
You know, this is not a good sign for Ukraine, because similarly to the case of October 7th, when the attention of the world, and especially attention of the US, was turned away from its primary problem, which was Ukraine. Similarly to these events a year and a half ago in Israel, now we have another reason for America to treat Ukraine as a secondary problem. And it's not good news for President Zelensky. However, we don't know a lot of things, so it may as well happen that now Trump will want to finish
at least one.
Realistically finish what's going on in Ukraine. And I think he must have understood, due to the behavior of President Putin, that only force can convince him to, maybe not to surrender, but at least to sit at the table. So maybe this will speed up his efforts to use force. Not force in terms of American troops, but sending more and better weapons to Ukraine.
Yes, it was interesting. We've had sort of mixed signals on this from the US administration over the last few weeks, because there's the Senate bill that is waiting, and some of the senators, Republican senators, are quite outspoken about Russia failing to deliver effectively, and saying it's time for sanctions. So there will be a G7 meeting in Canada after the weekend. Do you expect the US to be more in line with the rest of the big countries there, or?
You know, it's a very difficult meeting for Mr. Trump. He's coming to face 6 other leaders who are heavily hit by his ideas about tariffs. Even Britain, who got a deal with him, as the result of which no big tariffs are going to be imposed against the United Kingdom, but still there are tariffs. You know, whether or not they're working, they are at least painful and at least politically painful. And of course, he will hear from those 6 leaders what they think about this policy, which earned him a nickname of Taco, which is Trump always chickens out. This was created by a journalist from Financial Times and was quickly taken
by the financial markets.
Yeah.
This comes against the background of Europeans actually doing what Mr. Trump has urged them to do, which is to spend much more on defense. So Mr. Trump can take credit for that, because I think, maybe you will correct me, but we have moved beyond talking. There is finally action in Germany, in the UK, and in other countries. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte made an important declaration this week saying, you know, we're all on the eastern flank. This is good news for Poland and for other countries.
And it must be something new to Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, but, you know, at the end of the day, we all know that it doesn't matter what Spain and Portugal think.
Well, at least Spain said that they would not oppose any decisions at the meeting of NATO later this month, the yearly conference, at which there will be a decision of making a target of 5% of GDP spent on defense. Not all of it on arms.
3.5% on
yeah, and 1.5% on
equipment.
installations and so on. Like, for example, in Poland, it may be spent on repairs or upgrading bridges in order for them to carry tanks.
So, is it a breakthrough?
It's enormous change, you know, epic change what's going on, because NATO being so, in fact, diversified organization of 30 countries, including some strong dissenters, like, for example, Hungary and Slovakia. This organization has prepared a draft for new policy, which will include 5% of GDP spending.
Yeah, even 3% is something close to 600 billion euros, which is enormous. It's 5 times more than Russia spends on its war effort at the moment.
On top of that, we have this real change of position of Germany, who is going to spend 800 billion.
Yeah, eventually. It's interesting that you mentioned Germany, because the German defense minister, Pistorius, was in Kiev this week, and he pledged 2 billion euros for Ukraine in military equipment, German contribution. But it's interesting that he seems to be facing some opposition from his own Social Democratic Party of Germany. So it seems, you know, a group of leaders from that party called for peace negotiations with Putin and accused NATO of warmongering, which is kind of strange after 3 years of war.
I think, you know, this group of people which we call Russlandversteher, or
appeasers.
Understanding Russia.
Understanding Russia's concerns.
Yeah, and needs.
And needs.
Which, in fact, part of them is also Mr. Trump, as of recently.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this, because we had this...
but let me finish about SPD.
And then we'll move on. Yeah.
You know, when SPD was the largest party in Germany, it was a different story. Now it's struggling to keep his 3rd position, and after the elections. So,
is this an attempt to you know, sort of take votes away from the AfD, which is also sort of pro-Russian?
No, I think it's it may be an attempt somehow split from SPD and get together with some leftist parties on the horizon in
But that would spell trouble for Chancellor
Yes, but on the other
Merz,
hand,
right?
they have already had elections, and the coalition is not going to fall apart because of that. I don't think the numbers don't add up for those dissenters. And
but these dissenters, and let me now switch to another topic. You know, they're basically saying the same thing as Tulsi Gabbard. You know, the Mr. Trump's national intelligence director, who out of the blue did this video. Threatening nuclear holocaust and saying there's some unspecified warmongers that are pushing America and Russia towards a nuclear confrontation. So, you know, the Germans, these SPD politicians are what? Who is she talking about? Is she talking about NATO? Is she talking about Republicans such as Senator Lindsey Graham who supports Ukraine? What is she talking about? And why now?
Well, now because the White House is facing a decision whether to support this initiative of Congress initiative, and in fact bipartisan decision to go ahead with this.
So she's marking her dissent from this.
It's clear that in the U.S. administration there are these two camps.
But it's very unusual for a cabinet minister to do such a thing, isn't it?
This cabinet is odd enough to do things like that, and
maybe she knows something we don't.
That's for sure. She knows a lot of things we don't know.
But in this context,
even in this context, you know, in the end she's the head of intelligence, which has double meaning. Which is.
Oh, you're being cruel now.
I am cruel because there are some members of American administration which make you think if they are competent enough to be in charge of the most powerful country in the world.
But at the same time, you know, I remember our discussions here many times about how Europe and America are drifting apart. You know, some European politicians sounded quite alarmist at first. You know, Chancellor Merz, the new German chancellor, even said this is the end of the transatlantic relationship and we need to go the French way, so strategic autonomy. But then he went to Washington and he came back and said, well, actually, you know, the US is back. And we do see some reconciliation, some moderation on the American part, and we see the greater effort on the European part. So maybe some pragmatism after 5 months is finally there.
You know, this is all about politics, what you're talking.
Politics, stupid.
Yes. You know, you start in one extreme, the other side in one extreme, and always in the history of mankind and in the history of the US under Mr. Trump, the two positions were converging. And there's no reason for this to be different this time, because, you know, Trump just cannot walk away. There are so many different issues which would be very heavily harmed if he just walked away from NATO or walked away from trade with Europe. You know, this.
So reality is catching up.
Of course, especially in his tariff wars, which in fact are in suspension constantly.
Speaking of all of this, you know, one thing that strikes me is that President Zelensky actually is playing his cards very well, and he's got them.
As we noted.
As we noted in these attacks. And also, you know, basically Ukrainians are still doing their job. Europe is pledging further assistance. The Americans will see. But certainly there's a large degree of probability that, that the Americans are not going to oppose rearming Ukraine going forward. So, you know, what's your assessment of Ukraine's position at the moment?
For one, they have a problem with the war between Israel and Iran. Because again, well, this was one thing. But on the other hand, they show resilience. despite enormous efforts of Russian army. In fact, these advances of Russian army in the east of Ukrainian Donbass are limited to hundreds of meters or a few kilometers. So it's the war there is entrenched, and at the same time, Ukraine is capable of performing such actions like the one with bombing.
And also, they reported this week that these are Ukrainian numbers, but they said the number of Russian casualties exceeded 1 million. Well, this is what Trump is referring to constantly when he says, a lot of young people are dying.
Well, this is not million dead. It's million eliminated from the front line.
Yes.
Nothing more dramatic beyond what we see today should not be expected. Of course, we will, Ukrainians and Ukrainian civilians will face nightly bombing of their houses in major cities from east to west of the country, including Kiev. So this is sad, but it won't change the course of war.
Okay. Well, last subject we need to quickly discuss is the vote of confidence in Poland. Prime Minister Tusk called a vote of confidence and won that vote of confidence.
Confidently won it.
Comfortably, yes. But, there is a lot of commentary out there in Poland and abroad saying that his coalition is damaged after it lost the presidential election to the opposition candidate. So is Poland going to drift, or do you think that there is some chance that Tusk will now regain the initiative?
Because of political calendar in Poland, and because of the fact that after the parliamentary elections, after which we had a new central liberal government, but still a hostile president, everything in the political calendar was delayed for a year and a half until these presidential elections, because politicians, probably unanimously, together with pollsters, assumed that the president, which would come after the vote in May and June 1st this year, would come from the ruling coalition, which would be a candidate of the ruling coalition.
So in other words, they weren't doing much marking...
Exactly, they were waiting,
marking time.
They waited over this time when they could expect veto from the sitting president. And now it appears that they will have another vetoing
so another
president.
Difficult cohabitation.
Well, this understatement, difficult cohabitation, because this guy is openly far-right. The new president, Mr. Nawrocki, he has a history of cooperation with, let's say, nationalist wings of Polish politics. So it definitely is going to be difficult, and I think they will start to pass these laws in Parliament, send them to
the new president,
to the president, and start talking to him and negotiating, and then getting some reforms.
So will the government last till the end of the term, or do you think early elections are a possibility?
The instinct of survival will keep the coalition together, because the small members of the coalition...
They don't want to face the voters again too soon. Michał, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Face to Face. See you next week, and stay on with TVP World for more news and analysis.